All right. All right. So I will speak now, and it seems that we don't. This is not a microphone. This goes live to stream to YouTube. So we are streaming our keynote presentations live to the world. And I will now introduce the keynote speaker. And do we have the slide, starting slide here for the keynote speaker? This is not yet the one that we should have. So let's do some magic. So demo magic. Okay, good. So let me tell you a small story. Now that we have plenty of time, we will get the keynote slides on in a super second. And then we will start the presentation. It always happens the slides go in the wrong place, but luckily they are about to come. So how was the social dinner last night? This is going to YouTube, so it's good to discuss about the social events. Was the food good? We promise it's going to be pretty good. All right, I see people nodding in the audience, yes. And tonight we will go into a Viking restaurant called Harald. Very traditional Finnish people were the Vikings. Some Norwegians have been trying to steal it from us, but the real Vikings are hiding in the Finnish Harald restaurant. And that is what we are going to experience tonight. And I think that one thing that is quite inspirational is that it is indeed going to be very special the whole through the evening. And then you will see also the Viking baptism, whatever, I mean, I know exactly how it goes, but there is going to be the ceremony. So some of you actually will be baptized to be a Finnish Viking. And now that the slides have completely disappeared, I am getting more and more amazed with where they went. Okay, good. So his name is Antti, and he knows about this stuff. And then Rahul mentioned something about the rewards. So there will be a best paper reward awarded tonight, and tomorrow at the closing of the conference, there will be a best presentation / poster award as well. So in case you have happened to left the conference and you do receive this famous award, it will be delivered to you. So we will make sure that it finds. But so these are the two awards that we are going to have. And his name is Teemu. So now we have both of our technical people here. But now that I believe that we are very short to have the... Huh?
Which slide? This slide?
No, we need the keynote slides. So from the very first day of the PROFES conference series, it always has had very strong industrial focus. And today we have industrial keynote speaker, and he's a doctor. He did defend his thesis a few years ago. He is an expert in software systems development, and his name is Dr. Aapo Koski, and he has had more than 20 years of experience in the definition, planning, implementation, testing, commissioning, and maintenance of challenging information systems projects, and which are mostly in the public safety and defense domains. And Dr. Aapo has worked in several companies in Finland and abroad. And currently, he is working in a small software consultancy company, 61 North Point Solutions, and also he shares time as a consultant at Accenture. So please, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Aapo Koski.
Thank you, Pekka, and it's nice to be here. So I'm not introducing myself because Pekka already did good work on that. But what I may start with is that we definitely can possibly agree that software systems and information systems are complex and cumbersome nowadays. I've been lucky in the sense that during my 20-year career I worked in several projects with talented people, and we've been able in some cases to provide something that the users liked, and it was almost what was agreed on, and sometimes even on schedule and budget. But also I've experienced several cases where even though more or less all the things were there, that we had talented people, we had the good processes, we had quality assurance, we had a client that was wonderful, and still we failed miserably. And that kind of has bothered me for a long time, that what's wrong with us, and us I mean we vendors and the clients. There's something wrong here. And that kind of ignited my thesis some years ago, and also when Pekka asked that am I interested in speaking about these difficult things, I'm of course willing to do so. Especially with software projects, what seems to be the case is that the same things repeat themselves. We can find similarities in the failed projects. We often kind of think that, well, if we've changed that, then the outcome would have been better. And I think that's like too straightforward way to think about it, because this is complex things that we are dealing with. And the complexity does not stem from the systems themselves, but also whenever there are humans in the loop, things become complex. Just a short outline on what I intend to, if this only works. Now it works. Few words on the paradox. I'm explaining in a moment what I mean by paradox, about what's easy in this profession, what's hard, and then maybe shed some light at what could be a better way forward. The paradox or the contradicting issues that I refer here to is the thing that whenever we are in these kind of gatherings, and whenever I discuss with people who are within the software engineering domain, we seem to, and no matter whether that's industry or academia, we seem to agree very well that yes, we know how to do software engineering. We should be discussing with the customer. We should be client-centric and user-centric. We should do it incrementally and iteratively. We should use processes that get improved continuously. We agree on that. How come then we still fail if we know so well how to do products or systems that the users need? And that's again important point, need versus what they say they need. And this is of course nothing new. If you go back to several decades, what in the 60s, I did not do software engineering at that time, sorry to say, but I've heard about software crisis. That's basically the same thing. The software engineering was very young at that time, and they kind of thought that, well, code and fix is not the way forward. There needs to be better ways. Then fast forward 1 or 2 decades, the same problem appeared. Brooks talks about the same in the Mythical Man Month, or DeMarco in the Peopleware. And then again, decades go on and we still struggle with the exact same things. How do we provide the users something that they actually need instead of something that is in the contracts or in the requirements or the process provides? This is This is a difficult thing to discuss about. I feel ashamed sometimes that we are not better. So, some of the questions that I kind of resulted also in my thesis at the time were like, and I tried to drill in that what is actually the problem. And one of the main things that I think I still kind of stand for is that we are not very good at communicating. If I say something, you think you might understand what I meant. But what I actually tried to convey, it's not even close to that. And the larger the project is, software project, the more people there are involved. These lines of communications multiply. And then the degradation of information becomes visible. The pipeline that we think works perfectly actually loses information all the time. And related to this is that there's a strong belief that technology and tools that we use help us in this. We create systems like Jira or some other issue tracking tools, and we utilize all kinds of program management tools to help us understand, to help us communicate. And sometimes I feel that they actually hinder us in communication instead of helping us to understand each other better. And another thing, these are just some questions that I had in mind when I was preparing this, like how confident we are at times that are we actually building the right thing versus are we building the thing right. We are often very focused on the process and following the process, and that will bring us into a situation where we are building it right, but we are not building the right thing. And that's probably something we should focus more on. Let's start with the easy things. We are very good at blaming. Humans are wired to blame. It's often the first and obvious reason we find when something goes wrong. There was a human error somewhere. And after we find that there was a human error, we are happy because, let's say, fire that guy and then everything is fine again. Surprisingly, that happens. We believe that actually that was some person's fault. And this is much related to a fundamental attribution bias, that we find a solution and then we are eager to believe that that was the actual reason. And this makes us blind from the systemic errors, that actually this problem was not caused by that one single person who, for instance, forgot to ask the customer about the requirement or something like that. But it's a systemic error, that there was no chance for success in the first place because the process or something else causes that. And then, if this is easy, what's hard? Some years ago, that's quite many years ago already, I was working for a small consultancy company, and me and the CEO of that company had a problem that, well, those talented young software developers that come in, they are taught in the university or some other place, and we thought that they don't actually know how to do software engineering. And then we started kind of writing down things that we should kind of tell them to prepare them for real life software projects. This is my a result of that thinking. I started to write down things that then categorized them into certain categories, and it became a pretty beautiful picture. The point here is not for you to see what actually written there. The point is that it's very complex. There are so many things that affect this, whether a software project succeeds or fails. The nasty thing here is that it's enough for just a few of these to go slightly wrong, to reduce the probability quite substantially. We have to get everything correct in order to say that, well, this might succeed. That's kind of the story of this picture. Looking at the different categories, you see that there are things that are very much related to, say, traditional software engineering, validation and verification, or finding a solution, but also like defining the need and defining the quality. Those are sometimes kind of, we don't think too much about them. But what does quality mean in this context, for this customer, in this environment? We want to produce high quality products. What does the quality mean? It means different things for different people. It means different things in different situations, even with the same product and same people. It's all often retrospectively you can say that, well, that quality was not high enough. Beforehand, it's very hard to define. It's always a quality problem when something fails, but then was there a chance to actually correct that beforehand? I'm not sure. So I'm not going into details here because that's in the paper I wrote about this, and that would take a day or two to do that, and Pekka didn't allow me to talk about it 2 days in this conference, maybe next time. So obviously, and kind of that's my message, we are dealing with hard things. In some companies, this just happens to be from one company that had a code review the other day. They are thumbs up there, so obviously they are proceeding and doing the right things. But at the same time, when I see things like this, as well, this is the way to go, and now we'll fix it. That's very much related to one of the kind of main reasons why we fail. And getting back to that, and this is of course a bit provocative on purpose, I try to drill down that what are the actual primary reasons or probable primary reasons why we fail. One of the things could be that software is just too complex. It is, and especially if humans are involved, everything is complex. Large part of software systems are custom built, which means that they are not actually built from components that have been tested thoroughly. We always have to do some sort of compromise when we do testing. And with complex systems, there are just far too many parts in the code base that we can test everything. We just try to be good enough. Testing phases often rust, and the software goes out to the users in an unacceptable shape. Related to this, of course, might be that our industry is young. We've been building bridges and tunnels and buildings for, I don't know, a couple of thousands of years. Those probably failed too at some point. Now they often work as they should. But remember that why this building stays up is kind of, there's a tradition of few thousand years behind it. We learned how to build things. Maybe we learn how to build information systems, but it's maybe too early to expect that we know already how to build them when the software industry started like 50 or 60 years ago. We're still learning, so we shouldn't expect too much from a young industry as we are. Another, and these are of course hypotheses, so I'm just speculating that what might be the reason, so don't take it personal. We are optimists. The last picture I showed, those guys were happy that, well, now it's going to work. Elon Musk came to tell us how this thing should be built. And then we are happy that, yes, now we can do it. This same thing happens every time when I'm in a new project. We are so confident that, yes, this can be built. We have money, we have time, we have right people to do it. Or actually, maybe we just pretend we do feel that way. Often there's a kind of nagging thought in the back of our heads saying that, well, is this time schedule actually realistic? Do we have the right people to do this job? Do we have enough resources in the first place? Which kind of brings us to the fourth point I'm trying to make here, is that maybe we are not the right people to do this. Software industry has often been blamed for being an industry where it's very easy to get into. You go into you Google a course, and then there will be a training courses saying that, well, it's 6 weeks and we'll train you to be a software developer. And what does that mean? You can possibly learn the syntax of some programming language, but definitely in 6 weeks you can't understand the complexity of software engineering. That takes, like, in my experience, takes 10 to 15 years to understand a bit about it. But maybe I'm the wrong person to do this because I'm so slow in learning. I was not happy with these three. I invented more reasons. These were kind of internal, inward-looking reasons. Maybe the blame is outside or in the external factors. I've been in several projects where I felt that there was no way to succeed because something changed in the environment. Some things got delayed, or some dependency unexpectedly appeared. And how should we deal with such cases? We are kind of doomed to fail in those cases. And this, of course, has a relation to the kind of not good analogy, but analogy anyway, to buildings. Buildings obey physical laws. Software does not obey physical laws in the same sense at all. Software systems must conform to the external factors that they live in, but we often don't know well in what kind of environment the software system that we are producing lives in. Or that it might be that the environment is so volatile, it's changing all the time, so it's very hard to build reliable, well-working, high-quality systems because the environment changes. That definitely is one of the reasons programs fail. In several studies, there's this mention that, well, the customers were not, or the end users were not taken into account. I understand the point. There, you can read that in the Finnish newspapers nowadays. There's this already infamous software, huge software project, Aapo, where main reason that it's blamed for is that they didn't take into account the voice of the customer. Well, they tried, but still it was not enough. Partly, I see this is there are two sides at least on this. If you ask the customers, they don't always very well communicate what they actually need, because they don't know what they need. And it's too straightforward and easy way for us to say that, well, let's listen to the end user. The end user, in my opinion, describes the old system. So where is the change? Where is the new vision? Where is the effect of new technologies? Because the end user tells us what she's used to working with. So there's no change. And these are, of course, just problems. It would be nice to provide solutions at some point. Well, I'm getting into that, or some sort of solutions. I was not, I couldn't leave this without when I was trying to think about the lack of user input and what users deserve. Now again, a solution to that problem by listening to the users, that won't be enough. And we've known this. I referred some time ago to books that are 50 years old. Now I'm referring to a letter that's 1,200 years ago old. That's an English scholar writing to some Roman Empire, where he states that those people who should not be listened to, who keep saying that the voice of the people is the voice of the God, because voice of the people is it's riotous, in his words. It's a mess. And this is interesting in the sense that we often, just a few days ago, somebody referred that the voice of the people is the voice of the God. So you leave this out, then it kind of changes. Getting into solutions. This is again from a book. This is a reprint of the book. The earlier book was some earlier time, but it's the same thing. Sign tells us quite precisely what's wrong. What is wrong is that we think and talk about in these kind of conferences and in software engineering in general, things that we see, and we want to fix those. But we can't think and talk about what we actually see. We think and talk about so it's kind of inhibits us from a proper communication, because we only see things that we can think and talk about. Bad communication is one thing that it's hard to talk about. The solution has been there for long. Already in the 70s and 80s, in Peopleware by DeMarco, for instance, the same idea has been there right before our eyes. Changing from a world of products to a world of solutions, from outputs to outcomes, from transaction to relationships, from suppliers to partners, and from kind of elements to ecosystems. So these are the things. This is from one article not that long ago. What does this change of mindset result in? It provides us way to improve the quality of the products if I provide a solution as a service to my customer, and I know since I've done this, instead of product. I see how they use it. I understand how they use it. I get their way of thinking while I watch them using it. And I can do this if I provide it as a service and ask them for the permission to follow that, how you actually land, on what page you land and how you navigate and things like that. If I provide them a product, I'm only receiving the information that has been filtered to several channels as a ticket, for instance, that one end user was unhappy with the system and then she wrote down something and provided that to some other guy who typed it in the issue tracker system, and then I received that information. It's very hard to understand what they actually need if I'm not close to the customer. The other side of this is, of course, that the customer will receive better value because we can react faster, we can react immediately to some problems. It helps us in understanding us. By us here, I mean vendors. I seem to change what I refer to when I say we. We understand better what they actually need and possibly create new businesses, which would otherwise be based on some sort of market research by the client, and then they would try to tell their need to us, and we would try to refine. So what this means is our faster cycles, closer collaboration, and working together instead of providing products. And this is true agility. By agility, I kind of tried to narrow down that when I say agile, what I mean. I only mean three things. I mean that the customer or the end user is close. And when the customer is close, we do whatever we do, iteratively and incrementally. And the third thing is that while we are doing this, we all the time try to improve. We find, well, and this is what we are good at, as I said, we are good at finding errors. So we should be very good at improving processes because we see what's wrong with them. It enables agility, and especially it enables trust. Trust is a nice word. We often hear that, well, I need to trust in that vendor to closely cooperate that. And of course, close cooperation means trust. How you can find trust? Well, there are certain things that you can look for. If any of the processes that you work for in the company look something like this, that means that there's no trust at all. And it won't ever be. That won't create trust. This kind of project or process means that there is trust. Many companies, when they evolve, they change from here to something like here. That means that there's no trust. Processes, I'm not a process guy, obviously, but I understand why some companies like them. Processes are there to control. They are there to monitor things, but what they actually cause, they inhibit communication. They degrade the value provided by slowing things down, wasting time. And that's wasted time is money. And it inhibits this kind of behavior, the world including services or solutions. So my simple answer in this talk is that servitization is a solution. It's just listening to customers to learn what they actually need. But it won't stop there. It also requires you to validate and verify eagerly that did you understand correctly what they needed and did they actually knew what they wanted. That requires close, quick feedback loops. And servitization is not just providing something as a service. It also requires us software vendors to be very interested in what the client actually thinks and how they see their world. We are software engineers. We have our own way of thinking, and that's often very different from the way my customers, for instance, think. What would this mean for academia and business? On high level, focus on details. The details are the bad thing. We already know that, yes, agility is the answer. What does that mean in practice? That's the hard part. If agility in practice means processes, then it's not agile anymore. We shouldn't fall in that trap. We should focus on that, are we improving? And accept that, yes, as in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and other decades, no silver bullets exists in software engineering domain. That won't happen anytime soon, anytime in our lifetime. User domains are important. It's not enough to know if you are a techie. That's not enough in software engineering. You have to know the domain your customer is in. It begins with the terminology, the concept, the ideas, the ways of working, the organization, the doctrine of the client. Those things exist. If you don't know them, you fail in the communication. And soft skills, of course, are much related to all of this. You need to be able to communicate, or at least accept that you're not very good at communicating, and try to improve. Critical thinking, even writing. Those are things that are not taught too much, in my opinion, in software engineering. How to write. It's hard. I'm not very good at writing. So I'm repeating a bit myself, but on the other hand, I'm running out of time. Disciplined ways of working and communication are the things. Agility does not mean that we are kind of free to choose how to work. It's disciplined way. It's not just process. We want to get out of the process because process inhibits us in being disciplined. That's a contradictory idea, but think about it. It's actually true. Process enables us not to be disciplined because it's enough to do as the process tells. Kind of telling it that that's good enough. Have to find balance between control and trust, as I showed you in the picture. Communication depends on who you communicate with, what are the best ways. So you have to have a tool set of communication methodologies or practices and try out that what works. Is written communication better or oral communication in this case? And understanding that not just the needs but also the expectations, which are not often said out loud. Requirements don't actually tell that what the customer expects. It's hidden. It's kind of assumptions that are not said out loud because they are obvious in the client's domain, for instance. And these are the reasons we fail. So what I've covered here, and it's fair for some of you to say that yes, what's new? Nothing is new. Now, many of the points I emphasize here seem trivial. They are something that should be considered self-evident on any software program or project. But if anyone who is involved with any larger scale information system project can probably agree that kind of these trivial things we are not very good at doing them. So this is from André Gide 100 years ago. He said that all things are already said. All things are already said, but since obviously nobody was listening, we have to repeat it. On the last slide, one more thing. So my point here is that we should not continue as is. We need to make somehow a drastic change, that if we keep seeing only the things that we can talk and think about, it won't lead us anywhere. It's going to be difficult, it won't happen soon, but servitization provides us the tools.
All right, the new silver bullet is servitization, but hey.
No, Pekka, you didn't listen. I said.
But you said
Pekka failed the test.
In the process conference, he comes here and he says, I'm not the process guy. But hey, anyway, so here we have some questions, so please go ahead. Let's repeat the questions so that the people in the can hear. So
Antti will give the microphone. Both. You can use both microphones.
we can use both. Amazing. Let's go.
Yeah, hello. Eric Knaus, University of Gothenburg. I'm also reacting a little bit to what you said about processes. In a way, I would like you to clarify perhaps where you draw the line between processes and disciplined ways of working, and how you think, or whether you think that some of the knowledge in software process improvement can transfer into disciplined ways of working improvement. But it would be a strange acronym, I guess.
Yeah. The simple and short way to answer that is that I feel that if you have very strict processes in any company that I work for, that kind of allows the people not to think that I'm following the process, so that I don't have to think hard that is this the right thing to do, because process tells me that this is the right thing to do. And related to that is that the processes often are quite stable, so that, well, this is what we found out 20 years ago, that this works in our company, and so we do this way because it worked for one project at that time for those people. Now we are in the situation where, first of all, the world has changed, the customers have changed, the people have changed, and the thing that we work on is most definitely not the thing that we worked on 20 years ago when the process was developed. So I rarely see this kind of continuous improvement of processes that should be like on a week time scale, that we all tweak it all the time. I often see them as given that, well, this is how we work, follow this. And that's my point here.
And the next question is from Per.
Per Runesson, Lund University. You gave us a historical perspective, which we in our age can follow very well. And I wonder, have you thought about that we actually are pressing too much on, I mean, if we try to solve yesterday's problem with today's technologies, we might be better off in total. But we seem to be like we stress, we push the borderline in all software projects. I mean, it's good to push the borderline, but maybe if holding back what we actually try to achieve. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and kind of related to that, and I often struggle with the concept of when I hear somebody saying that we don't have to kind of be perfect. We only have to be good enough, and that's easy to accept that yes, this is how we should do. But then what is good enough? It's at least as difficult to determine as the kind of, so it's safer to try to push, because then the probability that we are good enough is higher. That and with my clients, for instance, it's been a constant struggle, because if the clients often think that when we are working on a project, that if they kind of give in on something, then they are kind of losing. So that this shouldn't happen. So that they always want the best. And that's one of the red flags that I thought that if there is a let's say tender in Finland for asking for companies to build the world's best something, that's kind of red flag that don't ever touch that, because that will fail so miserably. And I agree that we should try to define that what's good enough. What is the kind of we can work with this, so it doesn't have to be always the best.
Thank you, Aapo. We have 2 more questions, so please go ahead.
Hey, Javier from BTH, Lekinjäteniska Hochskola. So what would you say if I ask you, so servitization is here for like 10 years.
Oh, yes.
There are many companies with billions of users trying to throw mud to a wall and see whether they stick or it sticks. And they measure the customers, but they cannot know if they are doing the right thing. Because you cannot measure. It's not one it's not one customer, it's 1 billion.
Yeah.
So how can we, because I see some companies trembling already while servitizing. So what's your take on it?
I've not been in customer business so much that I've not thought about too much about that problem. But I was kind of thinking about that when I put in the slide of Vox Populi, Vox Dei, like listening to everybody will result in a turmoil. It won't help you. So in a product business, I would like to think that the kind of own vision should be the kind of guiding star, instead of trying to satisfy the multitude of requests. In a project where we have one customer or few customers, that's different setup in the sense that and also been in product business where there was this kind of imbalance that one of the customers was so big compared to others that that changes again the kind of setup that this customer has all the money and they are buying 60% of making 60% of our revenue, so we should probably listen to them, right, instead of the others. What's the risk of that is that the others feel that they are not listened to at all, and that of course also is kind of like how to balance in between the situation where the user feels that he's heard and when the user understands that they can't listen to every of my wishes, and that's some sort of compromise needs to be done there.
Thank you, Aapo. I think that we have to have one final question and then we can end the session. So please, John.
Hi, I'm John Knoll from University of Hertfordshire in England. I really enjoyed this talk, but I take issue with one thing that was implied, I think, and that is that we're still struggling with complexity. I actually think we do complexity really well, and I'll give you an example. Modern passenger vehicle, highly complex cyber-physical system with lots of software, life-critical constraints.
Definitely.
And even a cheap Skoda, you can jump in it, you can figure out how to drive it, and the user experience is actually really good. And then the more money you spend, the better the user experience gets, until, of course, you have a complex display that at least I can't figure out. But a big difference is not the engineering, but the business of automobiles, where the end user is also the customer, versus the information system that I use to try to find my timetable for my classes is a nightmare to use. And that's because nobody asked me. They asked somebody in our IT department, and they bought the cheapest system. So.
Good point. And when I mentioned complexity, I kind of tried to refer to the kind of the whole thing. The humans are involved in the complexity, and humans are probably whether that's end user or customer or that engineer. That makes it so complex. So the technical complexity, I agree that we've been able to create amazing systems that work amazingly well. But on the other hand, the kind of expectations always that if we can do this, then we can probably do this, and the scalability and the performance. There's no limit. It's hard for related to this for some project that I worked on. I tried to get some numbers from the customer that what is the number of users or events or what kind of scalability do we need. That we don't want to say anything because we want it all. And if you want a kind of system that is fully scalable, like without limit, that makes the system itself already much more complex than it needs to be. So reducing complexity should be the goal in many cases, because that brings it needs to be tested in many ways at all.
Thank you, Aapo, for an excellent keynote. You know, Finland is the Bappu Natale, the Father Christmas. Santa Claus lives in Rovaniemi, my hometown, and we are big Christmas people here. So this is a huge Christmas calendar, which has many patukka inside of it. Patukka is a chocolate bar, I believe. So enjoy, take it home, kids. But thank you, Aapo Koski.
Thank you.
And now we have a coffee break, and then the sessions will start in 30 minutes. So